yo'q, yo'q.
Boshlayveramiz. Assalomu alaykum bugungi tadbir ishtirokchilari. Assalomu alaykum Muhtarama Georgieva, Mamurza Berdibradovich. So let's switch to English immediately to be it easier. Madam Georgieva, first of all, welcome to Uzbekistan. It is a big honor for us to have such a distinguished guest. IMF, as other IFIs, is a big supporter to Uzbekistan, especially in the last several years of the reforms. Personally, me, as a former Minister of Finance, as a former Deputy Governor of Central Bank in both institutions, now in present administration, have a big chance to work with the IMF, with your staff, and personally, I know that Uzbekistan is the biggest receiver of technical support of the IMF in the recent years in the world. And thanks to this tremendous support, we have a big faith to all our reforms which we are undertaking this year. So please, all the guests of today's events, give a big applause to our distinguished guest, Madam Georgieva. Madam Georgieva, today we have a young economist and students. Most students are interns here in the Central Bank. Several years ago, Governor introduced a very good program for the students, where students of the last year from the economic universities have a good chance for 6 months to work while being a student at Central Bank in different departments, to get know to the overall Central Bank's work, to have a chance to work with the current economists, and to understand whether they really want, after the graduation, to work at the public sector, not only at the Central Bank, but in general, in Central Bank, at the banking sector, in public sector. At the same time, it's a good chance for them to show whether they are very good students and they can be chosen to work at these institutions. And of course, it's a big chance for them to ask a question from a person like you. For our participants, I'm sure you all know Madam Georgieva, but still, since 2019, late 2019, Madam Georgieva is the managing director of the IMF. You all know these institutions. Prior to that, Madam Georgieva was for 3 years, almost 3 years, CEO of the World Bank. Prior to that, for 6 years, he had worked for European Union in different high-level positions, like he was Commissioner for International Cooperation and Humanitarian Aid, and the Vice President for the Budget and Human Resources. And you can imagine that Madam Georgieva oversees 160 billion euro budget and 33,000 people. So it's a big achievement, and the main work was with the World Bank. We know mainly Madam Georgieva for many years as a World Bank representative. So Madam Georgieva, so many big institutions, so many work, well done, congratulations. And before I will give the floor to our students, I cannot miss a chance to ask my questions myself, when I will be able to do so. So you have a very good meetings. I heard that you had a very good meeting with our president yesterday. For the last 6, already 7th year, we are doing a very good reforms. We are pleased to do so. And what would you say about the perspective of the outlook for the Uzbek economy for the medium term, given that we are living in a very different and difficult environment? And I'm asking not about this year or next year, but overall for the medium term. What you would say as an IMF managing director about our economy for the medium term? Thank you very much.
First, salam alaikum. It is fantastic to be with an audience of young people. One thing you didn't mention about my bio was that I was a professor for 14 years, and I enjoyed tremendously a chance to be with students, to be with young people. So let me, to answer your question, I would start by saying that what Uzbekistan has achieved over the last years, since it has chosen the path of reform, is outstanding. It is very impressive how far you have gone. Just to give you one impression I got when we were landing in Tashkent, just looking from the window of the plane. So much has changed in this city in terms of road infrastructure, in terms of getting the visual of the city to be modern and dynamic. Now, let me place where Uzbekistan is and where it is headed in a global context. As you said, we have experienced over the last years unprecedented shocks. We had COVID, then the war in Ukraine, and a cost of living crisis across the world. It has led to sudden increase in interest rates in a way that no one expected could ever happen. When we look at Uzbekistan on this global horizon, in terms of growth prospects, you outperform significantly the rest of the world. We project global growth over the next 5 years to be weak, around 3%. Just to give you a marker, in the previous 2 decades, global growth averaged 3.8%, and this includes the time of the global financial crisis. Whereas for Uzbekistan, we project growth to be above 5%. Second, we look at the most troubling problem the world economy faces today, and it is inflation. It has been much more stubborn than anyone anticipated. In some countries, headline inflation peaked, but core inflation remains so high that at this moment we project that major central banks would see inflation going down to their targets only sometime in end 24 or actually even 25. Whereas here, and I want to thank the governor for hosting us, headline inflation peaked and is trending down, and even core inflation is already trending down. In terms of potential of the economy, you have high ambition. We talked about that with the president yesterday, to double GDP by 2030 and to bring per capita GDP to $4,000. And I am very optimistic about Uzbekistan reaching this marker. Why? For 3 reasons. First, because of the very strong track record of reforms. Why is global growth so anemic, so weak? Because productivity is low. Why is productivity low? Because the necessary underpinning in structural reforms is falling short. Whereas here in Uzbekistan, there is a very clear commitment to pursue structural reforms and on that basis to increase the dynamism and productivity of the economy. Second reason, youth. The country has youthful population, 60% under 30. This is a huge demographic gift if it is deployed properly. What does it mean to be deployed properly? Invest in skills, in capacity, in learning how to learn throughout your lifetime. And I was very pleased to hear from the President that investing in human capital is #1 priority for this country. To give you a sense how important this priority is, when I was at the World Bank, we did an analysis on what are the sources of wealth for countries. And what we found out was that human capital is the most significant source of wealth. Countries that invest in people do well. Third reason for a good prospect for Uzbekistan, the commitment to diversify the economy and link it as much as possible to the rest of the world. I find this to be very significant because Uzbekistan is a landlocked country. Very easy to not have that objective of linking to the rest of the world. But actually what you are committed to do is to overcome that constraint. And in that sense, connectivity, investments in connectivity, in infrastructure, in digital, as well as the immense attention that is being paid to be friends with everybody. And I would finish with this point. What is it that, to me, is the biggest danger for the prosperity, the aspirations of people to have better lives? It is the fragmentation that we see in the world economy. We have come a long way integrating the world, and it has paid off. Over the last decades, the world economy tripled in size, mostly driven by this integration. Who is the biggest beneficiary? Emerging markets and developing economies. They quadrupled in size. Rich countries also did well, they doubled. In a world in which there is a risk of cutting some of these ties, creating competing separate trading blocks, we risk all of us to be poorer and less secure. Countries like Uzbekistan who say, no, we want to trade with everybody, we want to be friends with everybody. All the power to you, because this is what would help us all to have a brighter prospect for the future.
Thank you very much. Madam Georgi, you mentioned about the diversification, about the cooperation, and I remember when a couple of years ago I was asked about my opinion as an economist, what was the kind of best first steps and the top 3 reforms. I mentioned that for me as an economist, the #1 is actually the reforms in the political sphere where our president started to rebuild a good relationship with our neighbors. Mm-hmm. And now, from our own experience, I can say that any cooperation is definitely better than any confrontation. Mm-hmm. And it brings a lot of positive results. And now you mentioned the #1 is the strong track record of the reforms. So based on that, let me ask the second question, and then I will turn to you. When we were talking to the IMF, to others, a lot of times you were mentioning, your team to us, that the sequencing of the reforms and the priorities is important. We learned it from you, we learned it sometimes from our own mistakes, but now we understand that how important to focus on certain priorities at a certain given time, not to try to do everything at once. It's impossible. So my second question will be, okay, we have done very good in previous years. What would be your recommendation where we have to focus on, let's say, top 3 topics for the next coming years to keep our dynamism of these reforms and to continue to grow?
Well, the number one prerequisite for strong growth is to continue to open up space for private entrepreneurship, to clear the remaining obstacles, and do so recognizing that there is still space. The state still has a bigger role in the economy than it would be optimal. Yeah. I'm not at all recommending that the state pulls out from everything, but in areas where we have state-owned enterprises that they can do quite well, they don't need the state, pull back, allow for more active entrepreneurship, and I do hope that some of the people in this room would take advantage of it. Second, you are now determined to accelerate entry in the World Trade Organization. For Uzbekistan, this is indeed important because you want to be more integrated in the world economy. Beyond just becoming a member, the tremendous benefit from being part of a competitive environment by stepping forward is a value for the country that I think time has come to move to close the finish line. And third, it is hugely important to recognize that in a fast-changing world, you need to have adaptability based on the resilience of people, the resilience of the economy, and the resilience in the face of what is now clearly a major risk, climate shocks. Positioning the country for the growth sectors of the future, rather than staying with the growth sectors of today and the past. We were talking with the president, and I really like that a lot, that a country that has 320 sunny days a year must have solar panels on every roof, and they're not yet there. Look into what, obviously the digital economy is one that has picked up so rapidly. How you position yourself in those sectors, that in those activities that we may even not know would exist, but how you create this innovation environment, ability to tap into the future, how you put incentives for companies and individuals to be willing to take risk, to step into the unknown, because if you're the first to step in and then win, that would be a big win. Of course, there will be also losses, but how do you create that yes we can economy? That I think is hugely important, and it is through reforms, it is through policies, it is through incentives, and it is through unleashing still untapped potential, some of which is right here in this room.
Thank you. Exactly. So with this, let's turn to the room then, to our young economist. So let's give a floor to our economist. I assume that the questions will be in English. In case if it will be in Uzbek, let us know that we will use our translators. Marhamat. Savol berisizga. Marhamat singlim. O'zingizni tanishtirib savol. Mikrofon.
Good morning. I'm Mushtari Boymatova. I am the senior year student at Tashkent State University of Economics and currently intern at the Central Bank of Uzbekistan. Dear Kristalina Georgieva, before I ask my question, I would like to extend my appreciation for your dedication to promoting economic stability around the world. That's a great job, and it's truly inspiring for us to talk and be engaged in this dialogue with you today. So my question is, what is the IMF's view on growing problem of water scarcity in the Central Asian region, and what do you think personally, what measures do local authorities have to take in order to avoid the upcoming negative consequences of this problem? Thank you.
Well, thank you for this question. Congratulations, Governor, for having young talent at the Central Bank. What we are facing globally is increased frequency of dramatic weather events. Last year, 2020, was the first year when there were climate-related disasters on all continents. No one was spared. And of course, in this world of changing climate, water, which is for this part of the world a scarce resource already, is likely to become even more scarce. At the IMF, we are looking into the economics of water, and what we have consistently recommended to countries is, first, make sure that this resource is properly priced, because if it is not, then it would be wasted. Second, for the Central Asia region where you share water, and you have this unique situation in which Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, their source of water downstream, Uzbekistan depends on that. Cooperation that is based on sound legal foundation and on engagement, so there can be strategic direction for deploying that resource, is hugely important. I was pleased to hear about some joint projects. Bring the interests of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, bring them together and invest together, so you can make best use collectively of this shared resource. And I would stress public engagement, campaigns for public information on the value of water, on the necessity to be protective, and then bringing the management of water down to the community level, because there is a lot that still can be done to harvest rain and then make sure that the water that you harvest is best deployed, to bring best techniques of deploying water in the most efficient way. I see that some is being done already in Uzbekistan. More can be done. So that holistic approach in which you place water in economic terms, in policy terms, the right way for what it is to come. This is a necessity. Peaceful Central Asia is Central Asia where water is valued and shared fairly.
Thank you very much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us.
What is the pricing policy on water here? Как вода, как ценовая политика?
Одним словом, не рыночная пока. Мы сейчас именно думаем перейти к рыночному ценообразованию. воды. Пока
It's not
только
market
первые
policy.
шаги.
It's not market price yet.
Well, that is a reform area that certainly is ahead. It has to be done very carefully, thinking about the implications, social implications. Uzbekistan now does have experience with social protection that is well targeted. That can be done also with regard to water. But I mean, unless we think of water as something that we value and we demonstrate we value it, it would be hard to achieve the best possible results.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Marhabat. Marhabat.
Hello, my name is Aziz Bek. I'm a student of Westminster International University in Tashkent. I'm also an intern. My question is, you've been emphasizing that one of the biggest challenges is the fragmentation in the world. So in your view, what are some other risks that the emerging countries will face in the future, and what solutions do you suggest for countries like Uzbekistan as an emerging country to overcome such issues?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me start with the obvious, that countries moving away from a commitment to strong macroeconomic fundamentals face risks. Even today, we have a number of emerging market economies that are in pretty dire shape because of ignoring the importance of sound macroeconomic fundamentals. If you look at the most important lesson we learned from COVID, it is that countries with strong fundamentals, good fiscal policy, good monetary policy, good structural reforms, they withstood the hit, the economic hit from COVID much better than countries with weak fundamentals. And I always make a comparison with people with strong immune systems. They withstood COVID better than those with weak immune systems. So a big risk for emerging markets is to ignore the hard work they need to do to build and in a fast-changing world to continue to build these fundamentals. I mentioned climate. Climate definitely is a risk everywhere, we are not helpless. We can, of course, move to a low carbon economy, pressure for that, but we also can adapt to a changing climate. I am very keenly aware that for emerging markets today and in the future, how will technology adoption go would make a huge difference. Some of them may be able to leapfrog, be the first to adopt technology. Some may miss. And then this dangerous divergence in opportunities that we are already seeing can grow. So be very mindful that an innovation environment is no more a good thing to have. It is a must to have, and that tuning to the economy of the future for emerging markets would matter the most. But let me tell you, what is the biggest danger to all of us? The biggest danger is inability to live in a peaceful world. I never thought, as a European, I never thought I would see another war in Europe, that I would see again a military power in Europe invading another country. But that happened. So if emerging markets want to grow, they have to be on the forefront of advocating for a peaceful world.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a follow-up question now. From the positive outlook, what opportunities do you see in the future for not just emerging countries but for the world?
The biggest opportunity lies in the incredible creativity of human race and ability to solve problems that may appear unsolvable. My favorite motto in life comes from the words of Nelson Mandela: impossible until it is done. And I think that the optimism I carry comes from the fact that I have lived a long life already, and I have seen tremendous transformation taking place. And I'll give you a story that is one that opened up my mind to how quickly the world is changing and how many good things come with change. I have 2 grandchildren. I was talking to my granddaughter a couple of years ago, and as a good grandmother, у вас есть внуки?
Да, конечно.
No. But as a good grandmother, I was telling her how life was when I was her age. She was 5 at that time, and I said, we didn't have television, we didn't have computers. So she looks up at me and says, so you only had iPads. Why I'm telling you this? Because the transformation that is happening is accelerating, and if we have the right attitude to work collaboratively and take advantage of our creativity and then deploy it for good, then of course we can have a very good future. But I also would say, because I'm objective enough to recognize it, that in the last decade or so, we are not paying enough attention to what makes the world a good place, and it is fair distribution of the benefits of growth. If I have one wish for every country, for Uzbekistan included, is that we don't concentrate just on growth, but we look into how we share the benefits of growth more equally, how we make sure that opportunities are for everybody, that kids from poor families can reach their full potential and contribute to society. Do you know what is intergenerational equality? You know, yes.
Yeah.
It's a very important measure. It says, how the next generation benefits vis-a-vis the previous one. What research shows is that intergenerational equality has actually stagnated and maybe even reversing a bit. In other words, the next generation has less opportunities than the previous one. And that, if I think of a policy area where governments must concentrate on, is on this sharing the benefits and creating opportunities, so we don't miss on the next invention because we didn't educate the kid that would come with it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Marhamat, yani savollar. Marhamat.
Hello, I am Anwar Jonkokono from Tashkent Institute of Finance. So you spoke about climate change and to be adaptable to climate change. Although Central Asian regions' total share in greenhouse gas emissions is so little, we are the most suffered country, most suffered region in the world. In order to be adaptable, we need some technical and financial aid from international organizations. We are always suffering from extreme weather conditions. We already had some minus 25 degrees Celsius bad weather conditions in winter. We had damaged crops, and climate change's impact on our economy, on our financial stability monetary system is already visible. And my question is, what are the IMF's plans about climate change impact on Central Asia? Are you planning to invest on some climate change infrastructure?
We are. So first, let me say this. Yes, your share in global emissions is tiny. Keep it this way. You don't need to bring more emissions than your economy potentially can contribute to. In other words, the fact that you don't contribute much today is very good. Keep it in this way. I have heard occasionally some countries that are minor contributors saying, oh, but we have the right to emit. No, we don't, because we live on the same planet, and if emerging markets and developing countries grow emissions, that would come back to haunt them, to hit them. But you are absolutely right. For countries that, like Uzbekistan, that have contributed very little but are suffering the consequences, there is an obligation from the world community to help. At the IMF, we take this to heart. We have convinced our membership that the countries in strong position can help us offer concessional financing to countries that need to adapt to climate shocks, that want to be proactive in their climate policy. We have created last year a 40 billion large resilience and sustainability trust. This is the newest instrument of the IMF. For the first time, the IMF is offering to its members two things that didn't exist before. One, long-term concessional loans, 20-year repayment, 10.5-year grace, and Uzbekistan is potentially could potentially benefit from tapping into this financial instrument. And the second thing that is new is that, and it is new actually globally, we are offering concessional finance to middle-income countries. First time in the history of international financial institutions. Why? Because we recognize that middle-income countries are, many of them are highly vulnerable to climate shocks, and therefore we must help. Beyond money, the IMF is now integrating climate considerations in our overall policy assessment, in the so-called Article 4 consultations. And we are looking into how monetary policy, how central banks can help the financial sector be more proactive in addressing climate-related financial stability risks. So we offer financing. We already have 5 countries. Did they become 6 last week? I'm asking, by the way, I should have introduced our board member, Marcel Petter is right here. He is the person who represents Uzbekistan at the board of the IMF. So we already, in a very short period of time, we already have 6 countries that have received financing, and the interest in this financial instrument is very, very high.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
Madam Georgieva, so IMF, this initiative means that the focus on the green economy and climate change is not actually the fancy thing for rich countries, right? Okay,
Oh,
so
definitely.
marhamat savollar, marhamat singlim.
Good morning. My name is Nadra Toirova, and I'm a leading economist in the Prudential Supervision Department. My question will be about your experience. So we know that you have successful career paths for a decade or more than 10 years. So could you please share with us about 3 main challenges that you have faced in your career path, if you have, of course?
Well, thank you for this question. So, biggest challenge for my professional advancement was myself. Why? And this is a lesson I want to communicate to all the young economist women in this room. My experience is exactly the experience of majority of professional women, which is we doubt ourselves. So a job comes. When I was in charge of human resources in the European Commission, I saw that multiple times. You interview 2 candidates, a man and a woman. The man comes and says, there are 5 requirements for this job. I cover perfectly 3 of them. And I'm bringing you my wonderful personality. There is no better person than me for this job. The woman comes and says, well, there are 5 requirements for the job. I only cover 3. You know, I'm not sure. Is that me for the job? So to all the women, you can think it in your head, never put it out of your mouth. So believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, why would others believe in you? Have that firmness. Of course, I was a professional as a working mom in the days when kindergartens were not sufficient. So a big challenge for me was to be a good mom and to be a good professor. That today is a solvable problem. It was a solvable problem then, but it wasn't solved. And I heard that here the government is very determined to have access to kindergarten everywhere for everyone. That allows young women to be good moms and good professionals. And perhaps the last thing I would say as a professional woman, you are in a better world. There have been many women before us that have broken the glass ceiling. But it is still a world in which sometimes you would find yourself in predominantly environment of men. And I think the important objective of women that are glass breakers is do it with good humor and a smile on your face. If something has helped me in my life, it is whatever the problem, I smile. And I'll tell you a problem I had in this region. When I was with the World Bank, I'm coming on a mission. I'm the most senior person in the team, big team, everybody else, men. And the officials in the region universally would think that I'm the interpreter. So they would go and shake the hands of the men. So what do I do with this? And I invented a solution. It was one of the men in the team first would carry my bag and second would introduce me. So I would walk and say, this is our most senior person. And I took it with a smile, and I actually, up to this date, I'm laughing of it. So that's kind of some of the experiences I had I can share. So best of luck. One day you could be the managing director of the IMF, and you would be telling stories like this to an audience like this.
Thank you very much for sharing and motivating me. Thank you.
Marhamat.
Good morning. My name is Sherzad. I work at Currency Regulation and Balance of Payments Department. Thank you for coming, visiting our premises. I have two questions. My first question is as following. Currently, we hear a lot in the news that many countries are making efforts to reduce their economy's dominance dollar, such as using national currencies in mutual trade and increasing non-dollar currencies in international reserves. What do you think? Is the dollar losing its dominance in the world economy? And what effects can this have on the economies of developing countries, which depend on dollar mainly? And my second question is as following. Could you share your opinion about how to tackle with the high inflation rates in developing countries, taking into account the conditions happening in the world today?
Excellent questions. Thank you very much for those. So let's start with the dollar. Why is the dollar a currency that widely is being used in the world? Because of the size of the US economy and the depth of the US capital markets. As long as the US has this strong position, the currency of the United States would be among the preferred currencies. What are the trends? Over last decade plus, we did see some decline in the role of the dollar in reserves. It was 70%, now it is slightly over 58%. Who has gained? Mostly the euro. The euro is now about 20% of reserves. That is pretty much at par with the size of the Eurozone, the countries that hold this currency, as well as some small countries. Switzerland, our executive director comes from there. The Swiss franc has gained a bit. The Australian dollar has gained a bit. The RMB, the Chinese currency, has gained. Not a lot. It is still a very small percentage. And yes, there is an increase in trade that is being settled in national currencies. We do not see anytime soon the dollar losing its primacy among currencies. But of course, the world is changing, and that change is something that, of course, countries need to pay attention to. How many of you have dollars in your... Is it allowed for people to have dollars?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so how many of you have dollars? Well, hold on them. It is not yet the time to move. For the emerging markets, developing economies, I'm sorry, what was your second question?
About inflation.
Inflation, yeah, I'm sorry, it kind of skipped. Let's remember that in many countries, inflation is not imported. It is a result of loose monetary policy, result of monetary financing, the central banks pumping money, and that can only be resolved by strengthening monetary policy. Here you have done that very successfully. To the extent that countries can move faster on bringing sound macro policies on the fiscal side, control your budget, don't spend more than you can afford. And on the monetary policy side, do not resolve your problems by pumping more money. That is the most effective way to fight inflation. Of course, also on the productive side, produce more goods. It is 101, economics 101. You know, you have to have goods that are kind of matching your money supply. So there is no magic. There is, however, exogenous factor, which is imported inflation. And again, countries should be just doing their job domestically as well as they can. There is no way to avoid the reality that when there is a war and oil prices jump, when a significant amount of grain is taken out of the market, food prices jump, that gets imported, and that is not the fault of domestic policy. But what is important is that you do your domestic policy right, and raise your voice, speak loud on issues that are exogenous to you, that the rest of the world needs to take some responsibility for as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello. Madam Georgieva, let me use my authority to ask one more question. You mentioned it at the beginning of the first question, one of the key reforms, priorities, accession to the WTO. Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you, but at the same time, we have a lot of critics of that, mm-hmm. saying that by doing so, we may hurt our local productions, you know, this advocates for mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Localization, etc., etc. And I assume that this is a big headache for the young economists and young students, because we have a two sides of the officials, of the big economists who always battle on this side. So what would be your answer on for those critics saying that we will hurt our local production with WTO accession?
Well, my first point is that the Uzbek negotiating team needs to go deep into what is in the interest in the country, what position you take. You're not joining without power to negotiate conditions. When tariffs kick in, how long is grace period on tariffs, which sectors are on a slower path. That is your choice. Of course, in negotiation with the WTO current members. This is where we, from the fund, we can help. Actually, I want to introduce our resident representative here and our mission chief. These are the people that are the main contacts with the fund. We are very committed to support Uzbekistan to have a deep understanding of its own negotiating position and why some issues need to be defended in this process. So this is number one. Two, you of course have to be assessing costs and benefits, and then present to the public why the benefits significantly outweigh the costs. A successful WTO campaign always includes public information, public consultations, so people can understand why for the Uzbek economy to grow, it is not enough to rely on the internal market. Let's say you get to 4,000 income per capita. There are countries that have many multiple times this income. Don't you want to benefit for selling them your goods? How can you expand if you don't trade? You are then limited to 40 million people, let's say with 4,000 per capita. And you guys are good in math. You can then determine how much you can grow if you only limit yourself to your own boundaries.
Thank you very much. And just to make clear for the audience that Uzbekistan is really committed on this issue, and President, His Excellency Mirziyoyev, recently signed a special decree where he appointed his representative, who will be the chief negotiator, so taking the kind of lead from the government to the President administration to coordinate all the different ministries' work in this direction. So we are keen to work on this direction.
Yep. We actually yesterday in the meeting with the President, we agreed that the fund will help over the next very critical months. And he actually assigned to Deputy Prime Minister Kuchkarov to work with the appointed representative and our team, so we can define what exactly the fund can do to strengthen to deepen your negotiating position. Yeah.
Так, savollar bormi?
Savollar.
Ma'mur Zakir, oxirgi savol sizga beramiz.
Госпожа Георгиева, от имени нашего всего коллектива мы очень благодарны за то, что вы поделились своими мыслями. Они ждали вашего приезда, когда 15 дней тому назад узнали, что вы приезжаете к нам. И я думаю, вы видите, происходят существенные изменения, и мы стремимся открыться и работать как все. В этом плане мы еще раз благодарим вас от имени всего коллектива и позвольте в знак благодарности, признательности представить вам.
Like you, I'm hooked to this.
Спасибо.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо огромное. Rahmat. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Let me say the final words to our young economist, that you may not know, we know, that the position of the Madame Georgieva is so, requires a very tough timetable. In this short 2.5-day meeting, she had a meeting with the President of the state, she had a meeting with the 2 or 3 ministers, and with you, youngs. So give a big applause. You are very lucky people who have a good chance to speak with Managing Director of the IMF, my apologies, Madam Kristalina Georgieva. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should we take a picture with the students? Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, yes, I'll do a selfie. Wait, what do I do with this? Just take it.
Here, you know how to do this.
I know how to do it.
Selfie.